All right, now then, we have one more chapter in the ninth chapter of the book of Daniel. Let's turn to that just briefly. I won't have time to go into it very thoroughly, but you don't have to. These things are all explained for you, and that's what I like about it. That's why I can get these things. They're just so simple that children can get them. We have here in the 24th verse of the 9th chapter of the book of Daniel, 70 weeks to determine upon thy people, finish the transgression, making reconciliation for iniquity, seal up the vision prophecy, bring in everlasting righteousness, seal up the vision prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem on the Messiah shall be 7 weeks or 49 years. And 62 weeks shall the street be built and the wall in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, meaning that he will be crucified. And in verse 27 is the important verse now. He, this Roman prince of verse 26, whose people were to destroy Jerusalem, and the Romans did that very thing 70 A.D. Here we have he, the Antichrist of the future, who comes from Syria and who has by that time just about ready to take Syria and conquer some of these other nations. He makes a covenant of peace with Israel. Well, you notice here, he shall confirm a covenant with Israel, many for 7 years. And in the midst of the 7 years, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease for the overspreading of abominations. He shall make it desolate even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured out upon the one making desolate. We read a few minutes ago in the 45th verse of the 11th chapter that when Antichrist comes to power over Israel, breaking the contract in the middle of those last 7 years of this age, that he will plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain, and none shall help him. He will come to an end. So the 70th week of Daniel is what is meant here in verse 27. I won't have time to go more fully into it, but any day we give lectures here, you are free to ask any question following the lecture, and we can get straightened out on some things that might be puzzling a little for you tonight. Now here's your 7 years again, between the second coming of Christ and the rapture of the church. The rapture of the church first. Then comes the 70th week of Daniel. And it is in the middle of this 7 years that the Antichrist breaks his covenant with Israel and is given power over all kindreds and tongues and peoples and nations of the old Roman Empire territory only, not over the United States and others, just over those 10 kingdoms. So he breaks the covenant with Israel and causes the great tribulation. So when men talk about the 70th week of Daniel, let's just think of it as being the last 7 years of this age between the rapture and the second coming of Christ. I'm going to show you while here that the rapture will take place before the revelation of the Antichrist. And we've already seen now that the 10 kingdoms must be formed before he comes. So let us all realize then that prophecy is not there to confuse us and to complicate matters and give us something to argue about, something we can pick at each other over. Prophecy is given there in the most simple human language possible for all of us to agree on. And when we come to the word after, I don't see why we can't believe that it means after instead of before. When it comes to the word 10, well, I don't see why we can't believe that instead of 1. And when we come to all these other terms, why can't we understand exactly like it is? That's the way it's going to happen anyway. And it won't hurt us to differ. But some people in religion today, they seem to want to just argue. I don't know whether they feel ornery or what. But they just feel like arguing with somebody. They've got to have a special interpretation. They've got to have their own interpretation. Now that we can do without very well. We don't need any of us to interpret the interpretations of the book of Daniel at all. Now then, let me say one more thing about the 28th and 29th, 38th and 39th chapters of Ezekiel. Going back to the middle of the 7 years, Antichrist has conquered the countries north and east of the 10 kingdoms. Then he leads the countries down against Jerusalem to battle, to do at the end of the 7 years what he wanted to do in the middle of the 7 years, but was hindered because of those new wars in the north and east. Now turn to the 14th chapter of the book of Zechariah, and you find that the Battle of Armageddon is fought at the very day that Christ lands on the planet Earth. We read, "Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoils shall be divided in the midst of thee. I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, the women ravished. Half of the city shall go forth into captivity, but the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. His feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. The Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof, half of it toward the north, half of it toward the south. There shall be a very great valley. Ye shall flee to the valley of the mountain. Yea, ye shall flee fled before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah king of Judah. The Lord my God cometh, and all the saints with thee." Now there's your Battle of Armageddon at the second coming of Christ. And when you read all the statements of Ezekiel 38 and 39 and compare that with other chapters on the Battle of Armageddon, you see it's exactly at the same time, from the same part of the world, and it will be literally fulfilled at the battle fought between Christ and Antichrist. Take the 19th chapter of Revelation, for example. In verse 11, "I saw heaven opened, and behold a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war." The armies of heaven, here it is again, all the saints coming. The armies of heaven followed him on white horses, clothed in linen, white and clean. Then we read, "I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together against him that sat on the horse and against his armies. The beast was taken, with him the false prophet that wrought miracles. Before him these were cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone." Now here's an exact description of the Battle of Armageddon, just like you have in the 38th and 39th chapters of Ezekiel. So no invasion from Russia or any other place will ever come against Israel until the Battle of Armageddon, unless we are farther away from the second coming of Christ than we dream of being. It is not mentioned in prophecy, if that's the case. For you read in the 17th verse of the 39th chapter of Ezekiel, "Son of man, speak unto every feathered fowl and to every beast of the field, come, gather yourselves on every side, that you may eat at my table, drink blood till you be full, eat flesh of captains, mighty men, bulls of Bashan," all that stuff. And then you read in the 19th chapter, Revelation verse 17, "I saw an angel standing in the sun, crying for the fowls of the heavens, come, gather yourselves on every side, that you may eat the flesh of captains, the flesh of mighty men." So you got every verse in Ezekiel long, and if you'll use it with 19th of Revelation and the 63rd chapter of Isaiah and the 14th chapter of the book of Zechariah and the 63rd chapter of the book of Isaiah and many, many whole chapters, 2 chapters in the little book of Joel alone, 2nd and 3rd chapters. All these describe the same coming of Christ at the same time. Christ not coming to fight the Russian as a leader of anything, but coming to fight Antichrist, who will be the leader, and Russia and other nations involved in the fight against Jesus Christ at the Battle of Armageddon. The Battle of Armageddon is only 1 day long, believe it or not. It's not a series of battles. It's not a long drawn-out war like we've had in Vietnam. 1 day. Zechariah 14 verse 8, 7 and 8, it says it shall be 1 day that shall be known to the Lord, neither clear nor dark, but at evening time there shall be light. So if we just learn to associate the Scriptures with a proper subject, that will help us a whole lot. And we're going to have to learn that if we don't live confused all the days of our life. We don't have to be confused, and we don't have to differ. It's a wonderful thing about it. You'll take the 38th and 39th of Ezekiel, along with this chapter in Revelation, these other chapters, makes just as easy reading as can possibly be, and everything confirms what the other one does. and all of them confirm the fact that Jesus Christ will fight at the Battle of Armageddon and will destroy Antichrist. Now, to prove that he does destroy Antichrist at his coming, we have in 2 Thessalonians verses 7 and 8 and 9. Only he who now hindereth will hinder until he be taken out of the way, and then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth. For this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they might believe a lie and be damned. So you see, at the second coming of Christ, he kills Antichrist personally. And that's fulfilled also as recorded in the 7th chapter of the book of Daniel, verse 11. I beheld till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. So when Christ comes, Antichrist and all the nations will be surrounding Jerusalem. Half of the city, Jerusalem, is already captured. Then all of a sudden, Christ and the resurrected saints and the angels will suddenly make their appearance and will defeat Antichrist, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst, east, west, north, south. There becomes a very great valley. You know, I've read so many magazines about prophetical happenings. Great things are happening in our day. Bible scholars have even got the Mount of Olivet splitting already. They tell us there's a crack there. I don't know. I've been there, but I didn't see any crack. And they have so many things. New Jerusalem's even ascending out of heaven already, the astronomers tell us. And so many things. If we could just lay aside all these kind of things, all this foolish interpretation, all this sensationalism, and stay by simple facts as they are stated in the Bible. And I'm going to show you tomorrow 2 lectures that the book of Revelation is just that simple. And you're going to understand the book of Revelation tomorrow. Now tonight, is there any problem about the book of Daniel that's hard to understand? I don't see any. Just realize that the 10 kingdoms are going to be formed. Antichrist will come from there and no other place. He'll conquer the countries north and east, and then we'll fight against Jerusalem at the second coming of Jesus Christ, and that ends the whole story. He will come to an end. Thank God. How many of you believe in the rapture of the church? Do you? How many of you believe in the second coming of Christ? Not the same event, but 2 separate, distinct events.